Good morning. This is a kickoff event for our year-long and continuing effort to increase and improve the diversity and the cultural competency of our district. So I want to introduce our presenters for today, and I do have to read a little because I didn't memorize their credentials, but we have Dr. Beverly Smith and Dr. Denise Shares. Both have a wealth of experience in public education, and our work with them today will be focused on improving student performance by increasing cultural competence, awareness, and understanding. Dr. Smith is the Associate Superintendent for Human Resources and Equity for the Waterloo Community School District in Iowa. She was born and raised in Waterloo, and she has a Bachelor of Arts degree in theater and elementary education from Cornell, a Master of Arts in Psychology from University of Northern Iowa. She was the first African American woman to earn a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Northern Iowa. Dr. Shares currently serves as Assistant Professor. This beats any of our titles. It's the longest title I've ever seen. The Assistant Professor of Educational Leadership and Post-Secondary Education and Director of the Institute for Educational Leadership at the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. I had to take a breath in the middle of that.
You got to see my business card. It's this big.
Her background includes a BS in Vocational Home Economics and Health, a Master's in Educational Psychology, Teaching, and an EDD in Curriculum and Instruction. We are recording the keynote address this morning. It will be live streamed to the Ustream site, and then it will be more permanently located on our YouTube channel. So I did let a few people I know who couldn't make it today know that they could tune in and watch, but we will also send a link out to all staff tomorrow in Dr. Wilcox's Friday update so that anybody, teachers, paras, whoever wants to watch it, can tune in, and I hope that you'll encourage them to do so. With that, I will turn it over to Denise and Beverly.
Good morning.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank Laura for getting us here. It has been quite a journey, and on a couple of occasions, I think I raised her level of anxiety and kind of put her into a tailspin when she would, and I'm guessing this is part of your culture, when she would email me in the morning, and then in the afternoon, she'd say, "Did you see my email? I sent you an email, and I'm kind of getting concerned." I'm like, whoa, kind of not our culture. But this is the culture that I guess. When we start at 7:30, and it's 7:27, and we've already had comments from the superintendent, introductions, and here we are. So, hey, I totally get it. I was going to have yeah, that's kind of wild. I was going to have. Yeah. I was going to have some conversation with you, just make a couple brief comments about what I've done in the work. And as I move around the table, and I'm kind of missing some of the things that you do that I used to do. And so I need to tell you that I used to run an early childhood program for a number of years. And I'm used to kids wiping their nose on my knee, and I kind of miss that. I definitely miss the hugs at the end of the day. I was also an elementary principal for a number of years, and most important is shaping who I am. I'm a Nana. Any Nanas in the room? Yeah. I've tried to forget that I was a mom of two crazy girls, but I'm a Nana of four, 11, 2 sixes, and by far the naughtiest 2-year-old anyone has ever seen. But he makes up for it because he's probably the cutest kid you've ever seen, other than your own. I can give you that. I'm also a survivor. I have survived, come Monday, 40 years of marriage. So, yeah. And let's see. Clayton, Dr. Wilcox, I'm sorry, has had the opportunity of meeting the other person in our partnership. He got to see him in a most interesting context. My work as the Associate Superintendent for Human Resources and Equity in our district has taken me on quite a journey. I've had an opportunity to do some curriculum writing for the state around diversity classwork courses. I've developed some training modules along this line. Denise and I have built a partnership that has been amazing. We've we've grown individually. I think we've grown as a partnership, and we've definitely grown as in being good friends. Um, I've also had opportunities, many opportunities we have, to facilitate discussions like the discussion that we're going to have today. The disclaimer is we've never done what you guys keep calling a keynote. That's kind of frightening, because what we do is we come in and we do what's most important in the work around diversity. We have a conversation. The conversation is the most important part as we look at ourselves and we talk about where we are on our journey, and we share experiences, and sometimes we may even have some insight or something that you can use and walk away with. But that's pretty much me. I'm passionate about this work because we're all in this together. And I believe that the cultural competency framework has great promise in helping us to figure out how to meet the needs of those kids that we're having difficulty meeting. And every district in the United States, and probably around the world, has a group of kids that they're struggling with to try to meet their needs. So hopefully through our conversation today, we'll have some opportunities to give you some thoughts about how we can do that.
And I'm Denise, and I am just delighted to be here along with Bev. We've received such a warm welcome, and we're so appreciative of that. You have an absolutely beautiful area of the country and an unbelievable facility here. So we're a little bit envious when we think about going back to our little Cracker Box offices. But it's just been a delightful experience thus far, and we're sure the rest of the day will be as well. I come from the K-12 system as well. Between us, we have almost 80 years of experience in pre-K-12. We're going to tell you that we started at 12, but you probably won't believe that. But I think this is either my 37th or 38th year in public education, and it's been quite a ride. And when Bev and I first began working together, I came from the Central Office Director of Professional Development side, and as we began to put this work together, I was really doing the processing, the adult learning piece of this work, but soon became passionate about the importance of this work. And for probably the last 10 years or so, we've been training around it. And as Bev said, we learn every day, every conversation we have. It kind of heightens our understanding, awareness, the interactions we have with you. We're every bit as much the learners as the facilitators in this conversation. So we're, again, just very, very happy to be with you. I've been in central office, teacher, all those things, in central office, associate superintendent and superintendent, and then this is my third year at the university level, which is a whole different aspect of education we won't go into right now, but if you think there's red tape in K-12 and hierarchy kind of thing, so, but I'm really enjoying it because I'm working with aspiring principals and superintendents, and I see that as such important work in building the capacity of that next generation of leaders. So it's been truly a gift to have the opportunity to work at the university level. I'm doing some writing. I actually have 2 chapters accepted about cultural competency, but it's sort of like getting a grant. You're so excited when you get the opportunity, and then you think, oh yeah, now I have to actually do the work. So that's been just a little bit of a challenge to block out time to do that writing, but there'll be some chapters coming out very shortly here about our work together. So we believe that we're a really good team, and someone that we knew one day said, hey, isn't your maiden name Kearns? And I said, yes, it is. And isn't your partner Bev Smith? And I said, yes, it is. She is. And they said, sort of like Smith and Kearns? And I said, I guess. And they said, you know, Kahlua and cream. At that, we knew we were a match made in heaven, you know. So with that, we'll get started with our work together. We've done that. The interest. We do want you to have our contact information and let you know that at any time, if we can assist in supporting this work, that's what we're here for. Your questions. We do have a parking lot, and you have sticky notes on your table. So if there are questions, particularly those of you that will have an opportunity to work with later in the day in small group sessions, please don't hesitate to post those comments, questions, so that we can be sure to weave those conversations into the work that we're doing with you today.
So now it's your turn to share. What we'd like to have you do with an elbow partner or two is to have some conversation around these three questions. What experiences have you had with this work? What challenges have you encountered in your experiences with this work? And what successes have you experienced? We can take a couple minutes, one elbow or two, and then we're going to share out just a little.
Guys know I started the diversity committee last year.
I'm not on.
And you bring your own morning refreshments. No, good. Oh, I'm sure it is. Thank you, thank you. Excuse me.
Manage the time, because I don't, yeah, I mean, not that in terms of, I don't know, how do you know when enough is enough? And,
Oh, I see. Let's listen for the conversation to dim a bit, but they love each other, so it may not. It's good. You off to a good start. I'd say in another minute or so. Lady in pink. The lady in pink that Clayton said be sure to engage started a diversity committee at our school this past year. So there's a chance to weave that in.
how do we want to share out?
Just
Burning question. Anybody that wants to share?
Yeah,
Brilliant.
let's hear. Yeah. Yeah, just something that would be important for others to.
And do we go down, share the first one?
Yeah,
Share
I
the
think
second
anything.
one?
I think
Or
anything.
anything.
Yeah, just in the interest of time.
Call it when you think.
Okay. Yeah, another 30 seconds, I think. Another 30 seconds or so. Not too much. Do you facilitate your own professional development at the building level?
Pretty much.
Pretty much.
We used to have CP3, which was the Center for Productivity, and they did a lot of staff development things. But now it's put back to kind of like our school-based. And then now there's a resurgence in that we have content specialists this year, starting new, a new team, and so we think that they'll be reaching out to community.
But the thing about it is, the majority of professional development that's occurring has to do with content, has to do with curriculum,
Yes.
has to do with
Yes.
content curriculum. We did a lot of, when we had a professional development department, we did a lot about pedagogy and
Pain.
I probably personally trained 4,000 people in movie pain.
Yeah. And then that kind of like went by the wayside for 4 or 5 years.
Well, with the new administration,
And are you building level administrator?
I am a
Central office administrator. Okay. In professional development?
I was in professional development for 11 years. I've been in student services.
Okay.
It was prior to that 11 years that I've been in student services that I trained at least 4,000.
Yeah, I wasn't in the paid trainer also. I think with that, I still do some modules with my staff when I need to on certain topics because I think it's very appropriate. And they do have that aha moment.
Yes, and
Like, oh, really?
so our efforts really were about poverty. And it wasn't just what we came, it was other things too that we weaved in that were about property, not necessarily about cultural
Yeah,
competence.
yeah, and we will include that. That's, yeah. Oh, oh, thank you, thank you.
Okay, if we could pull back together and finish the thought that you're sharing right now. Have had a chance to listen to some really amazing conversations and some really exciting strategies. Can we just share out some of the, it can be on any of those questions, just some brilliance. I heard some.
Or comments.
I believe the challenge that we've had in this area is for
You saw that slide, no. Thank you. Yes. Uh-huh, uh-huh.
that. Often we find that people are afraid to talk because they're afraid of out, and it could be inappropriate. Talk about the innocence of a child describing a friend just what they see, meaning nothing by it, but then the adults around the child then say, "Oh, that's somehow wrong," and the importance of being able to acknowledge different background, or if it's that acknowledging it is also important. Yeah, there's the value.
I can do wait time with the best of them, so I'm just.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
From the perspective of, I find the biggest challenge I have, parents and kids probably more of a conservative area. It doesn't matter. Washington County is kind of slow. Washington County is the same. Necessarily understand it because their worldview is different. My biggest challenge is how do I get your world is different from what your expectations. That doesn't mean your expectations have to be right.
And so many of the points that you bring up will be interwoven into our conversation, and it's very helpful for us to kind of understand what your background experiences have been and where you come from. I'll just do a quick step aside here. For those of you that do professional development with your staffs, we think that one of the keys is in adult learning. We know that one of the keys in adult learning is recognizing the expertise in the room. And we know that one of the keys in adult learning is each of us hearing our own voice in a positive way early on in a learning setting. So the conversation is very, very intentional, and we would really encourage you as you work with your staffs and others, with parents, in any kind of setting where there's mutual learning going on, that you have some kind of a grounding conversation first, because it really just brings out the brilliance that's among you and your experiences, which add richness to the conversation. So thank you very much for taking time to do that. Bev and I didn't really do this in our introduction, but we actually come from very diverse family backgrounds ourselves. And so when you talk about growing up in kind of a conservative setting, I grew up in a very rural, Catholic, German setting. And my first experience with diversity was at university level. And I realized what I'd missed and the richness of it. So from the very beginning in my educational career, thought, wow, these differences around us. And my parents never really encouraged those experiences, but they also, even though they kind of had their set ways of thinking, we'll talk just a little bit about our upbringing in a bit, it was just all new to me. But luckily I was able to come at it from the way that not a fear or concern, but there's people out there that I could learn something from and are very, very different from me. So we really have informed one another from our own cultural backgrounds. And I heard several of you talking about either your staff or yourselves understanding what we're going to call from me to we. So as we move through, we have some outcomes.
Look at them. We're wanting to capitalize, help you capitalize on the diversity in your district. And as you look at the aspects of culture, the expanded aspects of culture, those that transcend race and gender, you'll realize how much diversity you have in your district, and hopefully you'll be able to have some insight into how you can capitalize on that. We want to help you help your students, families, and staff. Denise mentioned the me to we. Cultural competency is an inside-out approach. We spend a lot of time, and you have to spend a lot of time looking at yourself, looking at your background, looking at your upbringing, looking at the influences that you are, which will help you interact more effectively with others. And then we also ask that you engage in this conversation today so we can work together and grow together. I know that, let's see, there may be a couple people in the room that have experienced life as long as I have. And those people, I'm guessing, because you've been educators, I'm assuming for quite a long time, have had an experience that's called diversity training, and you go in and you're ready to learn and you're ready to enhance your practice, and you walk out feeling pretty bad about yourself. I've had those experiences as well. I've come out of diversity training, as one calls it, and am pretty shell shocked. And as my kids would say, I walk out saying, I suck, you know? I need to tell you, by the way, that I have two daughters who are in the kind of hip hop. So every now and then, if I kind of do some of that vernacular, bear with me, because it seems like sometimes their speech gets right to the issue. And related to that, if you've had that type of diversity training, one of the phrases that they use, and I will use it, is, this ain't that.
So we really want to talk just a minute about our best hopes for our time together and the purpose that we have kind of framed this work around. We really believe that this work illuminates the need for conversation. And this next piece, we're going to really kind of make it very succinct about what's working for which of our kids and for whom the current system is least suited. And one of the takeaways that we hope that you'll take with you and take into your work and pose to your staff is a question that goes like this: for whom is the path most clear? We think that when we write a book, when we actually have time to sit down together and write a book, that will be the title of the book. For whom is the path most clear? Following up then on that question is, and what's the role and responsibility of each of us as district leaders to help clear the path for those kids that have barriers in their path to success? And in each of your buildings, in each of our districts, in each of our communities, there are children that have lots and lots of supports towards success built into their path. When we visualize this, we actually see a path with those little cones on it for barriers. And there are other children that their path is very cluttered with barriers. And to help move those barriers or to help students maneuver around those barriers, we really believe is the moral imperative of the district and building level leadership in a district. So for whom is the path most clear? When we have posed that question to groups, and this afternoon we'll come back to it a bit for those of you that we'll see again, it's crystal clear to us because right now in your mind, you're probably picturing children that have a more clear path towards success, however we define that, academically, socially, more likely to be successful in whatever ventures they encounter. And the kids that struggle to find that success. People can often, think of 10 or 12 kids right off the top of their head. But the real question is, so what are we going to do to help clear the path for those that don't have that clear path? And again, facilitating the conversation. We're so pleased that they would set us up here in small groups rather than we kind of pictured keynote, on a stage and theater style, which really, as Bev said, isn't really our mode of operation, to facilitate the conversation, which is the important part of the work. We should also tell you that we often teach this as a 15-hour credit course, and we've packed about the same amount of information, and we just talk faster.
My mom used to say, what you don't know, you can't lead where you won't go. And somewhere along the line, Gary Howard, you know him from the Reach Institute, he must have met my mom and she just didn't mention it because he wrote a book called You Can't Teach What You Don't Know. And the message he's sending us that we need to know this work, we need to know ourselves, we need to know who we're working with. And once we do that, we'll be able to more effectively reach. And your role as leaders of a district is to set that vision, and a vision that says we're going to meet the needs of all kids. And darn it, if we just miss a few, no, you got to meet the needs of all kids. We need to set high expectations for all, and we need to know who we're working with. And as a result of that, we're going to be able to provide education at high levels. So your role as leaders is critical. And I applaud your efforts, your past efforts, and I applaud your being here today as we work to help us be better educational leaders.
And we must say, too, that it's really to the credit of your district to recognize the need for the conversation because you may not be facing a great deal of ethnic diversity, although we know that in many communities that haven't had a lot of ethnic diversity, that's coming, that the changing demographics. But diversity as we'll define it, there's diversity in every setting. So whether we're talking socioeconomic diversity, whether we're talking age and gender diversity, whatever it is. So it is the role of leaders, and again, to applaud the district leaders for recognizing the value of the conversation. But it does take courage. And somebody said something about, I think it was, tell me your first name. Jessica, that sometimes you don't know how to approach the conversation because I know Denise because we share a name here. So I'm gonna call on her. We were born the same year and we think there's some connection to some movie star or something that we're named after. But it really does take courage. And it is really about a willingness to say, what's my upbringing? What's my culture? Each of us has culture. I taught a little bit of human relations when I was still associate superintendent. I taught a university course in human relations. And I'll never remember a young man coming up to me at the end of the course. We're together a whole semester. And he said, Dr. Shares, and tell this class, I didn't even know I had culture. He was from a Scandinavian community, and his name was Thor. And he did not recognize, when he spoke of his upbringing and the culture around his very small, very Scandinavian community, it opened his eyes to culture. So it really is about learning about the culture that we each bring to the educational setting, to our community settings, and then really thinking about where do those beliefs and perspectives come from. We'll talk about a lens. We're learning about a lens because your structure is so different. When we were with Dr. Wilcox last evening, and we noticed the size of the community, and then we noticed the enrollment figures that we've been seeing and some of the work we've been doing, it just didn't click with us because we have individual school districts and you have county districts. So when he said he runs 200 buses, we went, oh, so the different lens, the different perspective, one comes from their own understanding and applies it to a new setting, and until you ask the questions about whatever it is, you don't truly understand. So where do your beliefs and perspectives come from? And really that courage to engage in the conversations. And again, that for whom is the path most clear. And then to think about how we're going to support our staff. Because it's one thing to have the conversation among yourselves as leaders. It's another thing to take the conversation back to those you lead. So we applaud you for your willingness to consider these aspects of leadership and the courage.
And you can feel free to have courage today to share anything that's on your heart or in your head, because this is a safe zone. You won't be judged, you won't be criticized. Um, we accept any comments, ideas that you have, because this is a conversation, and that's what happens in a conversation.
And recognizing that this is videoed for further release, we'll really work to honor that. And I don't know the editing procedure, if somebody does say something they don't want out there, but we recognize that as well. So, you know.
And we'll, this afternoon, some of you won't be with us, but those of you who will be with us this afternoon, we'll have opportunities to do a lot more sharing, and some of those, and opportunities to share some of those things that would be a little bit more sensitive. One of the key concepts of cultural competency is that you have to understand yourself. And Denise talked about a lens. It is about the lens. In understanding yourself, you have a lens that continues to change as we view the world, as you work with your students, as you work with your families. And it's not anything, you can't come to a training and then walk away, yep, I'm done. You can't mandate it to your staff. That's probably one of the most difficult things about this work. You can't require people to do it. You have to keep the conversation in front of us. We have to continue to talk, have opportunities to share. You have to push their thinking. And the more engaged you are in your work, the more skilled you will become in pushing the thinking of your staff. You'll have opportunities to say, how does that practice serve all kids well? You'll have opportunities to look at some of the things that we do as educators and question them. They may be okay, but you have to question them based on the context, based on the changing demographics. Where are we? And it's like a moving target, because I'm guessing that the kids and families that you served 10 years ago aren't the same kids and families that you're serving today. And I can pretty much promise you that they won't be the same kids and families that you're serving 10 years. So it's a moving target, and that's why it has to be here. It has to focus on you and your responses. So, understanding that, we need to think about what values you hold about culture and diversity. You haven't talked a lot about the definitions of culture and diversity, and we will get there. But based upon your background and experiences, what values, what do you value? What are your values around culture and diversity? And how might your values impact the work? Back for a minute, and then if you want to share out, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Joaquin is a mountain school. He's performing arts school. Most emotionally out there principal, but he's sitting with 5 people that have close to us.
Okay.
The guy next to us, my chief financial officer, who is a closet racist.
In the blue shirt with the white hair at the back table by your blue ribbon teacher, by your blue ribbon school. No, I mean,
Oh, yeah.
he was sharing that. Some of that culture that they bring.
Guy back there in the green shirt
Okay.
was a human rights investigator in Baltimore. He's got great background, Dr. Terrace.
In what ways does your chief financial officer manifest his views?
He holds a set of values that if you don't hold, you're just not right.
That'll be. So that'll be.
And he is the big Boy Scout. Opposed to gay.
Like the special ed room that back in the corner in the dark behind the cafeteria with any kid that had any kind of special, yeah.
In some places, they're
Uh-huh.
and zeroed in on the special.
I didn't know. People have perspectives about what least restrictive environment means. Yeah. Restricted for who? Yeah. Uh-huh. You gotta understand. Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff.
Fair enough?
Yeah,
No.
good stuff. Yeah, you can, yeah, ask if anybody wants to share any
Okay,
insights.
finish the thought that you're working on. Finish the thought.
Yeah. Thank you. We are going to draw you back together. We always hesitate to end such rich conversation, but we are also very cognizant of the time and the rest of your responsibilities for the day.
Because we have somewhat of a schedule this morning, and I guess I probably need to know, what time were you supposed to start the second session?
9:15.
9:15. So does that mean
9:05.
8:45, 9? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that's when their break starts.
Yeah.
So I heard some really interesting and exciting comments around your values, how you value culture and diversity. A word that we started out with in this respect. We talked about listening. What were some of the other thoughts that came from your table? Other discussion points? Some of your ideas about how your values of diversity and culture impact what you do on a daily basis. How you interact with families, respect and you value the family unit. How does that impacts your work because you're interacting with families every day that are different.
I'll do that. But I just don't understand. Some people had some really good conversations. People come in and talk.
Can you share, can you just think of a couple of comments? Can you share a comment that a kid made that made you think, or a comment that a parent made that brought good? Okay. Yeah, I know. There's no,
A couple things that the students.
okay. Uh-huh.
But then I in a racial.
That's a great response, and a great strategy is listening and documenting comments. This afternoon, we're going to look at a continuum so you can where you are along that journey of cultural competence. And a great strategy is to document all those comments on stickies or whatever, and then look at the comments and try to see where the comments are on that continuum, and that'll help focus your work. Diversity committee is really amazing. Having community members on it is really amazing. Right now I'm working with well, actually with two different community groups that are mostly not educators, because your community, what's happening in your community is coming into your classrooms every day. There's no difference. You know, it's the same families. It's just that you've got the younger ones, the older ones are out in the community. So working with them to try to have these discussions and talk about strategies that will move families and communities forward. It's really good. Other comments or values, or what are some of the other values that have impacted your work? Comments?
Thank you very much. This is such great examples of the courage that it takes to lead, to reflect upon your own upbringing. I heard a lot about, in my family, this is how I was brought up, my cultural background. And I was talking to one of the groups, and do you sometimes just reflect, what would my mom say about this? What would my dad say about this as you face a situation? But it is that courage to reflect, that courage to share, and that courage to lead with some of the steps you're taking. So again,
Someone over at this table was talking about trying to monitor their response to people who, like an older person that they were interacting with, and they were kind of spewing some of this kind of racist, super conservative stuff, and he was like, you know, I get so mad, you just don't even know what to say, and trying to understand, and that's where you start. Just trying to understand. It reminded me a number of years ago in doing this work, I used a video called "Who You Are is Where You Were When." And it's totally what we were talking about. You have to understand the background of the individual, what their experiences have been, to help in your lens, and then you can help to mediate and progress.
I'm going to take a look at just some grounding definitions as we move forward. I don't think they're anything new to you, but we just wanted you to have kind of the basis of the work that we planned this day around. So we have a definition of diversity, and I think it was referred to before that it really goes beyond race and ethnicity. And you'll see there are multiple layers when we talk about diversity, as you can see by the definition that we utilize.
And those aspects of culture that are that are reflected in what we're talking about in terms of diversity, we're talking about diverse aspects of culture. And culture being defined as everything we believe, everything we do, what it builds our perspective, it's who we are, it's things that you probably haven't spent much time thinking about. And once you start thinking about who you are, where you've been, why you think the way you think, why you perceive things the way you do, it's going to change your life. And every time a situation comes up, you're going to go back to the inside. I wonder if I'm reacting this way because it's definitely that inside out. There is no culture-free zone. No one lives in the culture-free zone. Everyone has it. It's who we are. And it's just a matter of looking at that, just like Thor. He had no idea. And once you connect with your culture, it makes you almost a whole person. It completes you.
And then, of course, cultural competence, cultural competency. You can see this is not a new definition, one that's been around for a long, long time. But we want to really highlight it's the ability to respond optimally. That's the essence of cultural competence to those that are different. So that optimal response.
Okay, so the values of cultural competence, we talked about our values recently. Cultural competence, it's about all of us. No one is free from being included in terms of being a cultural being. It's not just some of us. We all have culture. We all are who we are because of our background. That's one of an important tenet in cultural competency. It's a growth model. I heard someone over here talking about it. It's not about deficiency. It's about growth. It's about where you are right now in the journey and how we're going to grow, how we're going to get better. It's a lifelong process. I cannot believe how I have grown in the last 20 years. And I cannot believe how many areas that I still have to push. Denise and I push, I think, in planning to try to figure out what we can do in an hour as opposed to 15. We really pushed our thinking about some ahas. It's amazing work, but it's a lifelong journey where it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And as educators, we really like to get it done, get to the end, and it's not that at all. It's growth, it's continuing. The important part is the journey, the important part. And everyone's a teacher and everyone's a learner. You know the whole, if I could walk a mile in your shoes, you can't walk in anybody else's shoes. That's their walk. You can't walk in anyone else's shoes. You can look at their shoes. You can walk alongside them as they walk in their shoes. You can listen to their stories and accept their stories. You can understand their perspectives. You can ask questions. Later today, sometime we're going to talk about how you can build relationships with people from diverse backgrounds so you can take part in the stories. Because if you don't know the stories, it's going to be kind of hard to understand who the person is and why they're who they are. An important part of this work is engagement. There's absolutely nothing that we say today that you have to agree with. We don't want you to agree with everything. We want you to engage in the work. That's the important part. It's much more important than attempting to agree with it. Our goal, maybe not our goal, but a side product of our work today is to create what we have called productive dissonance. If you walk away today and go, that's all right, we have failed. I'd say we failed miserably. If you walk away and say, I wonder if that's what we want. Because you've engaged enough, to internalize. There's a little dissonance there you might want to think about, or you might want to pursue. Or if we talk about a particular author, you might want to look at them and see what their work looks like and see if it can inform or support your work. Those are the values of cultural competence.
As we did this work, we were, again, very pleased to note that there's very direct connection to your district beliefs. So from your district beliefs document, we really pulled out 3 that we believe are key that address this concept of becoming more culturally competent. So again, applauding district leadership, your work here for making this important work a part of your day-to-day work in your beliefs. You probably all have those memorized, so no point. And you have a lot of them. I don't know if you've memorized them all, but you have a lot of beliefs, and a lot of them are connected. We pulled out 3 that we thought were most closely connected.
We should have bought the fabulous prizes, and then we could have awarded for people who
could list the district beliefs. Oh yes, we've even had bell ringers. We've had all kinds of stuff. Yeah, yeah. We were afraid they'd get confiscated in the airport, so we didn't bring all of our treats.
And an important piece is, and I've said it over and over again, what's the most important part of this work? The conversation. It's the conversation. We got to keep the conversation alive. All of us are in this together. And it's to do the best thing that we can do for all kids. And you have to give everybody on your staff a buy. You need to tell them, hey, I understand, I assume positive intent. And I think really in this work, that's a critical piece. You have to assume positive intent. There are people in your staff that may say things that make you cringe, but I don't believe, I know that no one in here is like this, but I don't believe that any educator comes to work and says, you know what, I'm going to do my best to serve just some of the kids today. I just want, if I can just get the high achievers to continue to be high achievers, I win. Assume positive intent, and assume, we just talked about it at a table. Assume that when people come back with things that you're like, what? They need support. They need encouragement. They need information. They need understanding. And we go back to that role of you as leaders. As you engage in this work, you'll be able to ask those cognitive questions along the line of, help me understand. How can I assist?
Someone once told me, never forget, the parents are sending you the best kids they have. They're not keeping the smart ones at home because they don't need you. They're sending you the best kids they have. And we truly believe that teachers, they're not holding back a bag of strategies that they could use, but they're saving them, for when they might need them. Teachers every day are doing the very best, and administrators the very best they know as well. So it really is, how can we collectively elevate the work that we're doing to most optimally serve all kids? So as we said, we've been doing this work for lots of years, and we think that part of the work of leadership is making the complex simple. Now, this work is extremely complex, and we're not going to make it simple, but we're going to work to make it so that you get your arms around it. So we've really pulled out what we think are key considerations, and we're going to share them with you today. And again, that each of us continue to learn and grow. I'll tell just a quick story on Bev, because as she said, we've been working together for a long time, and I said that I'm from a rural background. And my family, we grew up in the country, and we had gardens all the time. And so when I married, and we've lived in the same house for 37 years, so we have quite a little garden space, going. And Bev was at our house one day, and I said, would you be interested in some new potatoes? Because the potatoes, if you like to watch anything grow, potatoes are wonderful to watch grow because it's lovely leafy green stuff. And she said, new potatoes? And I said, yeah, some new potatoes, and you cream them with peas. Did anybody do that? Peas and potatoes come and you make this cream sauce. That was a delight at our house.
Who knows about new potatoes? How many people know about new potatoes?
See, Beverly?
Okay.
See, Beverly?
You win.
And I remember she looked at me and she said, you mean new potatoes as opposed to old potatoes? I mean, she didn't get it. So I actually went back to the garden and pulled potatoes on the
I sat there.
She was in the car already, pulled him, and she said, I didn't even know potatoes grew under the ground. And I thought, so it's sometimes about those subtle nuances of upbringing and understanding that we can continue to be both the teacher and the learner.
And there are people who are sitting here who think, they're from Iowa. Oh my God. It ain't so. It ain't
All they
so.
do is raise corn and
Yes.
pigs, you know,
My
yeah, there
husband
you
is from LA, and the first time he took me home, his whole family, they were all waiting because they expected me to be in overalls. It was it was the strangest thing. Well, honey, she looks kind of nice. You know, they didn't get it. They didn't understand. His name is Fuji. Hmm. And when I told my mother, when I first said, you know, I'm dating this guy, Mom, his name is Fuji. He's really sweet. I think he's the one. And she's thinking that he is. Yes. And unfortunately, when I said to him, honey, how did you get that name? He said, well, my dad was in the service and I was born at the foot of Mount. Yeah, he was lying. And it wasn't until I introduced him to someone and told them that crappy lie that he says, oh, really, there was this wrestler on TV named Mr. Fuji. Anybody know who that is? Yeah, and when my dad would turn off the TV, I'd start crying.
The truth comes out. The truth comes out. So key considerations as we move forward.
And some of these things, Denise and I said, because we've been doing this work for a long time. And so we've been having conversations, and we start thinking, okay, top 10, top 5. If we don't do anything else, what are some of the points that we just need to make sure? Because you can't do much in 90 minutes. Some of the points that we just have to make sure that people understand. One is that the conversation is most important. I think we got that. We've been talking about that. Two, that it's a journey. It's not a destination. There's no map to this because everybody has their own different map. There's no real way to say, okay, this is what you do. It's a bumpy journey. There's some times when you're going to say, oh my God, are you kidding me? They came in here and did what? Those people. It's curvy. Okay, so we've developed this strategy and we have all of the interpreters we need for our Hispanic population. Oh, so now we have 400 Burmese people? Huh, nice. We got to go back to the drawing board. Understanding that the journey is the most important part because the more you equip your lens and the more you understand who you are and you're looking at that, you have the strategies that it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the context is, you're going to adjust because you've got this lens that'll help you look at the world and look at your kids and look at your families and look at the population and look at your interactions and say, I may not know how to respond, but I know there's some cultural stuff going on here, so I got to figure it out. I know that I may not know how to respond to this Hispanic family who won't really tell me what's happening with their kids in school and won't really say that the teacher has been really inappropriate with their child and their child has been bullied. But I understand because of my lens that there are some Hispanic families that truly believe that teachers are held in high esteem and they take care of their kid at home and you take care of my kid there, so they're not going to tell you. Those are the lenses that we're looking at. Those are the lenses that you're creating along this journey. It's all about relationships. We were taught, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But that's not the golden rule of cultural competency. That is, treat others the way they would like to be treated. It's kind of a twist. Does everyone want to be treated the way you're treated? Probably not, because they're not you. So how do you understand, how do you learn how people want to be treated? You build relationships. How do you build relationships? Conversations, through research, because you're going to need to understand a little bit about who you've got, who you're dealing with. And then you're going to use that information as you build relationships with them. You're going to talk to people. You're going to talk to kids. You're going to have kids come and talk about their background in their writing. You're going to have families come in and share their skills and background. You're going to build relationships. You're going to recognize the richness of the diversity, and you're going to use it in your districts. And you're going to understand the concept of funds of knowledge. Dr. Lewis Mole is a researcher at the University of Arizona. And his premise around funds of knowledge is that families have resources. And as you think about some of your most challenging families, stop and think about some of your most challenging families. How difficult is it for you to think about those families and think that there are things that happen in their lives and in their homes that can serve as a resource for you to better equip and support their children? Sometimes it's kind of difficult, isn't it? Oh my God, what could they bring to the table? His premise is, as you have interviews, as you have conversations with parents, you can understand things that you can take and build with their students. You know, when kids come to school, we believe in our heads that they have these hooks. They all have these hooks. And our role is to take the knowledge and to just hang it on the hooks, okay? And we're used to doing that. We've been doing it for years. Kids come in, letter recognition, letter sounds, Dolch words. I mean, you go along, you're hanging all that knowledge on. But what's happening, we're starting to get kids that have different hooks, and they're not like this. They may be, you don't even know where the hooks are. So you need to figure out how to understand the hooks. And through Dr. Mole's work, he has had educators interviewing parents, and then he did something totally unheard of. Well, he required teachers to do something that was totally unheard of. They had to do home visits. Some people do home visits. You guys do home visits here? You had to do home visits. But he had educators do something that was very difficult for them. It's very difficult for us as educators. They went into the home, and this was all explained to parents. They sat down, and they did something that we don't know how to do well. Sit down and be quiet. You don't tell parents about what they should do. You don't, you need more books in the room. The lighting isn't, do you need a quiet place to study? You don't do any of that. You sit down, don't talk, and you watch. You watch what happens in the home. You watch interactions. You watch how they get it done. And what do you think educators walked away with? Were they saying, it's just dysfunctional. They don't know how to do anything. Or were they saying, you know what? They help each other. This happens. You know, there is an organization. It's interesting how they do meals. They learned a lot about families. They also sent a strong message to families that I care enough about you that I want to learn from you. That's the funds of knowledge. That's how you learn how others want to be treated.
You're probably noticing how often we're talking about listening. And that's something that we don't always do that well either, because we always want to share, you know, the knowledge and the expertise that we have as the educators, but that true listening. And this next key point really illustrates that, that differences are not deficits. And the story that we're going to share here, and really we want to say right away, we're going to share stories to illustrate points, but you all have the stories too. And it's really about examining your own stories that this is guided. So I was associate superintendent in an urban district, and one day was going to one of our buildings that was in a more impoverished area of our community early in the morning for an early morning meeting. And as I arrived at the building, there was a gentleman that was kind of walking up beside me. And I must say that my first thought was, this is a homeless person, and I wonder if we need some kind of security here, because I'm not sure what's going to go on. It was before our buildings were secured. We didn't have those little nice lockdown vestibule, those kinds of things at that time. And the gentleman was dressed in sweatpants and a sweatshirt that didn't quite cover his stomach, and what we used to call garden shoes, those canvas shoes, but they weren't quite all there. He didn't have any teeth, unshaven and fairly disheveled. And I really was kind of concerned because children were going into the room. And so, as the associate superintendent, now I'm thinking, do I stand in front of him? Do I ask him what's going on? About the time that I'm deciding what to say, this little, about 7-year-old skips up beside him, and Grandpa bends over and he says to the little guy, "You have a good day in school today. You listen to what that teacher says. You do what the teacher says. You learn something, and I'll be back to pick you up at 3, and I love you." And I thought, I just got goosebumps all over again. This was a number of years ago. That's exactly what I said to my children this morning. Each of us wants the very best for our children and for our grandchildren, but sometimes we see those differences as deficits. And for a while, I was really ashamed of my initial reaction, and then I just had to go back to, we're all teachers and learners. As we were planning for this, an aha came to me, though, and I said, Bev, you know what? Had I really understood the funds of knowledge that grandpa could bring to me, I would have stopped and said right there, thank you for supporting your grandchild. Thank you for what you're doing to help clear the path for this little guy. I wish I would have kept track of him because he's probably, a rock star scientist by now, as a number of years ago, the little guy. And what else might we do to support you in supporting your grandson? And I just think there's such power in that, and in taking time to have that conversation and to listen and to not see differences as deficits. And we think that this quote kind of sums that up. The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit. And I think that is a key point for us all to consider as we undertake this important work.
Someone mentioned that when we think about culture, the first thing that comes to mind is what? Race. Okay. Second, typically, is gender. But there are all other aspects of culture that we need to be aware of and we need to drill down into, and we'll do a lot of that this afternoon. But that first group, ethnicity, language, gender, many of those protected class type cultural aspects. But there are also those at the bottom that we have to be just as sensitive and aware to, that don't put us in the isms. One way to kind of divide it, doesn't, those cultural aspects that don't really put us in the isms, but there's still cultural aspects that we have to be sensitive to as we work with kids and families. And in some of our work, we have taken a day and we hit each one of those areas and talk about it in depth, and talk about some of the nuances of that particular cultural group, and we talk about some of the strategies that we can use to support in those areas. Things like eating habits, and how, as some educators have been honored and have the opportunity to share a meal with some of their families. It's a big deal. Understanding what happens in that meal and how it works. I shared my brother who I have lost, but my brother studied in Africa, and he had engaged with a family, and was invited to their home out in what he calls the bush. I can only imagine what that was. But he was saying he sat at the table and they were sharing a dish. And I remember it was called wok. And the reason I know that is because he came home and he did it. This super hot meat type thing. And you use this bread and you take the bread and you use that kind of as your spoon and you scoop this stuff up and you eat it. He was sitting at the table and he got ready to eat and he reached in and his friend grabs his arm. Well, my brother happened to be left-handed. And in that particular area, you eat with your right hand and personal matters with your left hand. It was that was a cultural nuance that he needed to be aware of. Those are those types of nuances. Time is a big one. How many of you have families from different groups that time isn't really respected as much as one would think? Yeah, I have bought so many alarm clocks in my life, it's just astounding, and made those calls. Come on, you guys, we got to go. And we have now something called family support workers that actually go and get the kids because it's like, it'll be 10 o'clock by the time they get everything done that they need to do in that house before they send their kids to school. So the whole concept of time, I tell Denise, my happy place is in the islands. In fact,
Very soon.
next Friday, going to be in the Dominican Republic. But at any rate, the concept of time. Have you gone to Jamaica? Have you gone to one of the islands and you go to the restaurant and you order the food? And by the time it gets there, you have drank so many Sunbirds or Mai Tais or whatever that it doesn't even matter because it's this fluid thing. American culture, we do crazy stuff with time, don't we? What would be, when you have little kids, when you have elementary kids running around with a planner and they're doing the time thing and they've got a schedule in their room and they've got 4 o'clock, I've got clarinet lessons and at 5 o'clock I got basketball and at 6:30, it's a time thing. We own time differently. I have a Native American friend who says, that doesn't belong to you. But we own it. We reschedule it, we overschedule it, we divide it, we do all these things with time. So understanding that is one of those concepts. Space is another. There's some ethnic groups and some other cultural groups that don't do space well at all. And if I'm trying to talk to you and I'm too far away, it's like, what's your problem? You can't get close to me. And in other cultures, if I get too close, it's like, ooh, back up, you're invading my space. And in some cultures, if I'm not close enough that you can feel the breath on my face, you don't care about me. And knowing which one is kind of an issue. The other associate superintendent in our district, I tease him all the time because he's totally a space guy. He's a Canadian, and I don't know if that has anything to do what cultural circle that has him there. But we're working together. we're a partnership, and we're learning each other because after a few times of getting close to him, and I could see now I do this. That's the best I can do. But as we understand these cultural nuances, it's important because do we ever want to do anything that's going to offend or break down a relationship with students and families? It's kind of like the little black boy that's having an issue, and you go and, well, it happened. I've seen it happen. Little boy, he's having an issue, and the teacher's upset because bottom line, first of all, he comes in the classroom late, and then he's going to come with a hat on his head. And so what does she do? Does she say, excuse me, Jahan, you need to take your hat off and put it under it? Nope. What does she do? And it's on. Inappropriate. Not acceptable.
And speaking of time, Miss Beverly.
Oh, are we running out?
We have about 15 minutes.
Time
And
doesn't matter in this
and the culture here. We are guests to this culture.
So the caution as we do this aspects work is overgeneralizations because we're educators and we want the answers. We want to know everything we can know so we can respond effectively. And the caution is we overgeneralize, and so you learn about And you learn about things like working with Hispanic kids, or working with African American kids, or working with kids in poverty. And you read the script, read the modules, and you know that this is how you respond in every case. They're poor, so this is how they respond. They're black, so this is how you respond. They're Hispanic, so this is how you respond. And absolutely that doesn't work. You know, we learn about different cultures because we want that background information, and then we have to understand that there's a lot of difference within cultures as well as among cultures. And one way to address that and deal with that is cultural informants. And I talked about that, I just mentioned it earlier, in terms of connecting with someone from that culture, someone that you can ask the questions that you always wanted to ask, you know, and you don't want to offend anyone, so you have someone that you love and respect, and you can say, Denise, talk to me about, you know, and it can be anything. That's what you need to do. It doesn't have to be about her whiteness. It doesn't have to be about her living in a rural community. It can be about, what do you mean saying rosary? Talk to me about that. What does that mean? And how does that how does that impact? Yeah, it's anything. That's how we grow. I have a superintendent right now, and we are very similar, although we are very, very different. We're the same height. She's a little thinner, but she's the same height. Both educators, been in education for quite a while. But there's so many things that she asks me about, and there's so many things that I ask her about. We both like, I like to eat, she loves to cook. So we talk about some of the things that happen along those lines. We are in very similar cultural circles. I'm African American, she's not. But we're both women. We're both educators. We're both Christians. Talk about that stuff. You know, we both worship, but we worship so differently. And some of the things she says to me are some of the things I hear about worship, because they say at 11 o'clock, that's one of the most desegregated times in the country. But some of the things that she says and she shares, it's like, time is an issue for her group. When I go to church at 11 o'clock, it's usually at least 1 o'clock when I leave, but it might be later than that. Because a belief, a value is you don't rush the Spirit. It comes, it happens, and you flow with it. She shares with me one day, at her church, there's a clock at the back of the church. That's what I did. I laughed too. She said there's a clock at the back of the church, and the minister watches it, because if he gets close to the hour, he has to stop, because that's what happens, and that's why that clock is there. And I'm like, yeah, right. So I asked a couple other people who said, absolutely. I mean, 1 hour, that's it. And then Denise shared, if you can't get it in an hour, you don't need to get it. And Denise, and I was talking with Denise about that, and she shares.
If Mass is more than 45 minutes, and our priest has said that after a 7-minute sermon, we have the right to get up and leave if he goes more than 7 minutes on the sermon. Now, that might be overboard a bit, but it's truly 45 minutes, people start getting antsy. And I've attended Bev's church, and that is such a cultural informative experience. We've attended each other's churches, and it's just, they're so loud, we're so quiet. You know, the people stand up and talk. Only little children do that, and then we shush them in my church. So,
And that, you know, that's it's kind of just
Cultural
a good
nuance.
example of how different things are and how you can inform. Our CFO at the time is Catholic, and I went to church with him because I really like to, I want to know how people live. And I'm with him, and he's doing this to me. I mean, the whole time you get on, you know, and there's a point where you say the Lord's Prayer. We all know it. But guess what? At one point in the Lord's Prayer, he goes, but what about, okay, cultural informant, helping to help you navigate the world.
In the Catholic Church, that's how we know the visitors. They start for thine, and we go, over this house. So.
But usually they wait till they're done before thine, and then they're like.
In the whole concept of privilege, We know that's one that's probably been explored in a number of diversity trainings that you may have attended. We know that it's critical to the conversation. But as we talk about it, we're not talking about just white privilege or male privilege, the things that can kind of become contentious and shut people down. We're talking about power and the distribution of power. What groups hold the power? What's the hierarchy in a district? How is that manifested, that whole concept of privilege? But most importantly, for what kids is the concept of privilege a barrier to their success? Because for whatever reason, they and their families are not deemed to hold it. As you had your evening event last night, and all this wonderful support around these kids going on to school, and I mean, that is such a critical piece and should be applauded. But you know, there's privilege around understanding, navigating, getting into higher ed. And for those kids that don't have those supports in their backpack, providing it for them is such an essential piece of the work that you do. So we would like you to reflect on this, but given the time, we're not going to stop. But we would like you to think about the influence of privilege in your district or building. Who holds the power? What group is the district and building structured around? And how might we help to understand that so that we can better serve all kids?
And how do you know where you are? How do you know if you're doing well? Well, one way is to say, I think we're doing okay. I think we're meeting the needs of all kids. Or, I really feel it. As I watch kids and I watch family, I feel that we're doing fine. Or you can do some driven decision making around it. One of the things you need to do is look at your demographics. And I heard that at your table. You guys were talking about demographics and tracking participation rates of students, tracking suspension data. Absolutely, that's what you need to do. Disaggregate your data and look who's being served well and look who's being served not so well. Changing demographics. Do some trending. Do a trend line. What's happening? What's happening with your free and reduced population? What's happening with the increase or decrease of ethnic groups within your organization? I wrote the dance because how many of you like to dance? It's freeing. It really is. It's a freeing opportunity. I'm blessed to have a husband who likes to dance, and we do that a lot. I mean, that's just when you're stressed and have a bad week. And by the way, his weeks aren't as bad as mine because he's been retired for 3 years, so he plays golf. That's his new job. But when he's having a bad day, we go out and we dance. But the dance changes when you change partners. If you've danced with the same person, families, all of your life, you're in step because they know you and you know them and you know the steps, you know what their moves are, what they're going to do, you understand them. But as your partners change, your steps are going to change. And you're not going to expect them to know all your steps, all your moves, right? They couldn't. And you certainly don't know theirs. So when you start dancing, it's going to be a little awkward for a while. But after a while, you're going to be in the groove because you've changed your dance a little and they've changed theirs a little. That's our dance. The equity matrix is something that we came up with in our district. We are at a new level. It used to be this tedious process of disaggregating data and then looking at the data and looking at percentages and the whole 9 yards. I know we have a technology person in the room, and our tech people have come up with this marvelous way of pulling data out of their student management system. So now our principals don't have to go through the changes of attempting to pull the data. It's just the click of a button, and they have a disaggregation of data at any time they want that will include student achievement, that'll include attendance at evening events, attendance at parent conference. It'll include who's been recommended for special ed, who's been recommended for ELP or talented and gifted, who's been recommended for remedial classes, who's signing up for STEM classes. You have all that data at your fingertips. So then you can look at it and you can analyze it and say, for whom is the path most clear? Who are we serving?
Does it still come up in green, yellow, and red?
Yes, it does.
Yes. So there's
If there's
signals.
major discrepancies, the computer basically says, "Oh no!" And if not, it's you can see what the different levels of discrepancy are.
Great piece. Another key point is that it is about all kids and embracing their ability to learn. And if you've not read the work of Gloria Ladson Billings, she does some work with Dream Keepers. And it's powerful work. But here's the key message that we want to leave with you about the work of being dream keepers. And that is that each of us have had dream keepers that have supported us on our journey. You don't do all of this by yourself. And for some of our kids, we have to be their dream keepers. Their families do everything they can, but they need that extra person in their corner to be their dream keeper, to help them to believe in themselves, to know what opportunities might be there for them, and to support them along the way. And if you think back to your own upbringing about who was kind of always in your corner, saying, you can do that. I know you can. You can be successful. You have the ability. We're behind you all the way. Those are your dream keepers. For me, it was my parents. And my mom actually grew up in the Appalachian Mountains, not very far from here, very, very poor. My dad only finished the 7th grade. I used to say 8th grade, but I was telling him that I was using him as a story, and he said, honey, I need to tell you something. I only went one day to 8th grade. I didn't like the teacher much, and she didn't like me either. So he actually dropped out after 7th grade, lied about his age, became a truck driver, worked in the John Deere foundry all of his life. But they were dream keepers for their children. My mother actually went to college. If you've ever been in Berea, Kentucky, or you know Berea, Kentucky, it's a tuition-free school for underprivileged children of academic promise. Don't you just love how that sounds? And just this past winter, we visited her campus. It is unbelievable. Every student there works. It's only undergrad. Every student there works to support something on the campus, but they go tuition-free. Tuition-free. She had dream keepers. She had an aunt that had moved away from the mountains and came back as she was the youngest of 7 children, came back and was a dream keeper for her, and they passed that on. So the question that we want you to take just a minute for is really twofold. Who was a dream keeper for you? And maybe most importantly, who needs you to be a dream keeper for them? So just a minute or two of conversation. And then we're going to close it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Nine.
Yeah, we're about 2 till. But we really just have quotes left. Right? We'll encourage them to do this. Okay? Yeah.
When you're done, I'm just going to say you're going. So, and you keep saying this after.
Yes.
Yeah, later,
Yes.
later
One this
today.
morning.
Later today. Oh, listen to the detail orientation there.
Actually, based upon our schedule, it's all morning for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think my mic is on.
Is your little button green? Is your button green? Oh, then maybe the battery's okay. Yeah, you're doing good. Yeah. So let's just say we're going to close out with
I'm
some
going to read
quotes.
that. We're not going to do anything with it.
Yeah, yeah. That we're done. I wonder if we should get them this, but they don't have this in print.
I wonder if they have opportunities to do this. I wonder if they have opportunities to do that, because they have a lot of conversation.
They do. They do. We're going to encourage you to continue to have the conversation around dream keeping, but we know that we're almost at a transition time here. So, and we do recognize that we'll see some of you in just a bit, that we have a morning breakout and an afternoon breakout. We said in our time zone it's all morning, so, but not all afternoon. So we're going to close just with a few quotes and some pieces that we want to leave you with as a full group.
You have to have the right heart condition to do this work and be successful in this work. I have a good friend and colleague. His name is Robert Smith, and not a relative. And he talks to us. He does some motivational speaking. And one of the things he used to say all the time is that kids know if you're real. They know if you're live or if you're Memorex. Well, I said that to a new teacher group a couple years ago, and they're looking at me like,
What?
so some of you who have had experiences, as many experiences as I, would understand that. But what he's saying is, if it's not in your heart, it's not in your horn. Yes.
And I think that was what we heard from this table, that kids know. I thought that was such a great insight over there. Yeah. We aren't going to take a lot of time on this one, but we really do think that the power of this work is asking you to reflect upon what's the next step for you. What strategies and actions might you employ to support your own cultural competency and that of those around you? So some reflection pieces there that, again, in the interest of time, we're going to not take time to have you visit about now. But we do want to close with just a few quotes. This one from Peter Block. If we are waiting for more knowledge, more skills, more support from the world around us, we're waiting too long. Because the kids that you're serving today need the very best that we can provide. And doing our very best every day is all that anybody can ask from us. Go ahead, Ben.
Leadership is key. And we've talked about your role as leaders. Marian Anderson says there are many persons ready to do what is right because in their hearts they know it is right. But they hesitate, waiting for the other one to make the first move, and the other in turn waits for you.
The urgency that we feel around this work. And really, it is a moral imperative. If you know the work of Lisa Delpit, does a lot of work with this. And we've talked about this. Listening requires not only open eyes and ears, but open hearts and minds. We do not really see through our eyes or hear through our ears, but through our beliefs. It's not easy, but it's the only way to learn what it might feel like to be someone else, and it's the only way to start the dialogue. So again, that reiteration about listening.
We'll be sharing some stuff this afternoon with Lisa Delpit, but those who may not be here this afternoon, I'll just say Lisa Delpit is someone you need to read. One of her most interesting Other People's Children, and it's a very insightful book on how we approach working with kids from diverse backgrounds.
And the final quote, Sitting Bull, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. And we want you to remember, it's just one step at a time. So we really, really appreciate you being with us and your engagement. As we flew in yesterday, a group that we talked to today was going to be hiking on a mountain in Peru. And another group that we talked to was flying to Florence, where they're taking a gourmet cooking lesson today. But we think we're every bit as privileged to be with you sharing this important work on cultural competency. So please don't hesitate to let us know what we might do to help you.
This morning.
Thank you both. That was a wonderful way to spend an hour and a half, so thank you. I appreciate that. Just to let you know the schedule, if you don't have your agenda in front of you, there's a quick break until 9:15. Then elementary is going with Matt. Hagerstown room, secondary is back here. Thank you.
Of the afternoon. Oh my goodness, you were right. You were right. I was.